The race for Secretary of State, the focus tonight.
The Dan York State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Taco Comfort Solutions.
You know, if I went down Main Street, any town in Rhode Island, and asked who the Secretary of State is, I'm not sure we would get more than 1 or 2 out of 10 people to know that it's Nellie Gorbea. All due respect to our Nellie, as her advertising portrayed her last time around, election-wise. Yet the job is really kind of pivotal when it comes to running elections and setting up the system for it and running all sorts of business administration matters. It's always been under the radar, yet I think pretty important. So we can't ignore it. Nellie is scheduled to join us sometime later this week, and her Republican opponent is here this evening, and you'll meet him coming up momentarily. Great to have you in on this Monday as we head toward Election Day, just a couple of full weeks too. Let's take a look at some of the things that are happening in the news. This is scary for the base, so to speak. Here's what CBS had latest.
Members of the nearly 5,000-person caravan headed toward the U.S. border come from different circumstances. Some say they're victims of gang violence or poverty in their home countries of Honduras and Guatemala.
It's very hard because the heat from the sun is getting us tired, but we're warriors. We're going to keep on going. We're not going to stop.
President Trump over the weekend repeated his defense if the group tries to enter the U.S.
I would call in the military and I would seal off the border.
The president also, in a tweet, seemed to blame current immigration policies, writing the caravans are a disgrace to the Democrat Party. Last night, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo released a statement saying, in part, "We are deeply concerned by the violence provoked by some members of the group, as well as the apparent political motivation of some organizers of the caravan." CBS News' Adriana Diaz is with the caravan. Those she spoke with explained why they were risking their lives to make this trek. This man simply stating he wants to give his daughter a better life.
Yeah, that's usually the motivation of most people who are doing this. I cannot believe that this president is approaching this the way he is doing it. First of all, the attrition rate, the number of people who actually will make it to the Mexican-U.S. border, probably negligible compared to the 4,000 to 7,000 that are estimated to be moving along. They're entering Mexico legally. The notion that this is some kind of, enemy, coming to the United States border that has to be met with military, it's just the kind of flame that Donald Trump loves to start and to engage. And isn't it just wonderfully coincidental that it's happening just a couple of weeks before the election? I think most of us have an inner part of us, though, a soul, that says, let's make a little bit too much of this. And the idea that the caravan of people leaving Central America, moving through Mexico with a dream maybe of getting to the United States, is the Democrats' fault is laughable on its face. Let's move on. The debate that I think you need to see, you got to go to WPRI.com and see the newsmakers' production of the conversation between the House Speaker, Nick Mattiello, and his Republican opponent, Steve Frias. Here's the latest on that from the weekend.
There are plenty of differences between Democratic incumbent Nicholas Mattiello and Republican challenger Stephen Frias. From the state's economy,
our tax burden on our citizens has gone from being the 47th most oppressive to the 37th.
47 to 37. Okay, so that's basically we've gone from an F- to a D-. In my household, that's not satisfactory.
To taxes.
We've expanded the sales tax on the internet.
We have not.
Yes, we have.
We have not.
I'm paying a tax on the internet. I don't know if you are.
You always had a tax on the internet,
well,
sir.
I'm paying it.
The two also disagreed on taxpayer-funded legislative grants. That's money lawmakers can give to community groups and nonprofits.
If you are dependent on legislative grants, you will not be getting a legislative grant from me.
We have beautiful fields that our kids play on and have the benefit of because I look at needs, I assess them, and I take care of them.
On legalizing marijuana, Mattiello and Frias found common ground, sort of.
Would you consider it?
We consider all options.
Mr. Frias?
Everybody talks about considering. I'm not in favor of legal pot.
Okay.
I'm not in favor either, but we would do the analysis.
The Speaker is always doing an analysis, and he's always taking into consideration. Two of the elements that Tim decided not to put into that story, there's only so much you can pack in, is the post-game discussion on the Paw Sox, which is just a complete frittata. I mean, listening to the two of them fight about that is worth watching. The Speaker Mattiello, tried to pull a fastie at the end, half engaged in saving the Paw Sox and ended up blowing up on him and the entire state. Steve Frias was against it all the way and kind of drove Mattiello's tepid support of it. But between the two of them, they should both be ashamed of themselves, in my humble judgment, in terms of how they handled this particular issue, how they ignored the idea that we were already in a public-private partnership with the Paw Sox in the city of Pawtucket. And forevermore, that will be one of those things. And as time goes on, both of them will be to blame, although I don't know who will remember, that, hey, yeah, and we lost the Paw Sox too. How did that happen? These two guys are at the core of that, no doubt. The funniest part of the debate, though, and you got to check it out on WPRI.com, was when they were talking about legislative grants. I have my own name for that I generally use on the radio. For some reason, I'm more comfortable with it on the radio than I am with television. But it's a fight that I have been waging for years and years and gave up on literally 10 years ago because it doesn't seem like a system that will ever go away. But I will tell you, Frias says there will be no, it's like the soup Nazi, there will be no legislative grants in the city of Pawtucket, meaning, the $500 checks to the Little League or the $5,000 checks to the Little League, and all the other organizations within the state that get those checks. Mattiello is talking about the needs of the people, and he'll continue to serve the needs of the people. The problem is the Speaker has so many more grants because he's the Speaker that the needs of the people in other cities are generally not equal to the needs of the people in the district. He's the candy man. And I will tell you, Frias, credit to him because he's been candid about it. But if people really pay attention to the lack of candy that might be coming back to District 15, he very well may not be in the position that he thinks he's in, which is to upset the Speaker of the House. Remember, he was 87 votes short last time around, mostly due to mail ballots. And finally tonight, this is, at least when it comes to the serious issues, this Richard Gardner protest thing is really unnerving in the Washington Post section of Providence. And what's most unnerving about it is not just the idea that neighbors are coming out there day and night to protest this guy who was convicted of sexual assault of children and who was in and out of jail for 3 decades and through some kind of bureaucratic screw-up has been out and about. Reportedly, he got married this weekend in Cranston, and that's got a whole bunch of people, nuts. But the folks who are getting engaged in this, in part, were energized by the mayor, who 2 weeks away from an election came in there and said, he doesn't belong in this city. He doesn't belong in this city, and we will 24/7 surveil him. I checked in with Andrew Horowitz from the Roger Williams School of Law about this last week on the radio, and he had strong words for the mayor.
Fueling the fires of vigilantism and mobism is not an appropriate thing for a mayor or any public official to do. The 24/7 watch at this stage, I actually think, is required for one purpose, which is to protect Mr. Gardner. There's an angry mob outside of his house, and they continue to say that they'll be there every day. I don't think the police department at this point has any choice but to do its duty and protect Mr. Gardner's safety.
How long will that go on? And what about the other near 300 people who are in the same category? Crazy. The ACLU has weighed in on this, interestingly, suggesting that while they do not have a problem with people's right to protest at a certain address, targeted protest, I think the term is restricted enforcement or something along. There's a term, hold on. Yes, selective enforcement is a problem. There's an ordinance in the city of Providence that calls for it. What they're suggesting is undo the ordinance, and people can parade, if I understand correctly, they can parade in front of the houses as long as they want. This is not going to end well, one way or the other. All right, what did end well last night for the Patriots was a victory despite not playing well. That's when you know you got to. That's what my Giants never do. They never win when they're not playing well. For those of you at 7:30, you don't know what's happening tonight in Monday Night Football. For those of you at midnight, you probably already have seen, I hate to say it, another Giant effort where they did not play well. But who knows? And of course, tomorrow night brings us the World Series. I know it's exciting as heck for Red Sox Nation. As a Yankee fan, it troubles me, but I've learned to bite my tongue. But am I mistaken that since you guys broke the seal back in 2004, it just doesn't seem as big? I guess that's just natural. Good luck to the Sox. The Dodgers will present quite a problem, including that pitching staff. When we come back, the Republican for Secretary of State. He's got some good ideas. Stay with us. So Pat Cortellessa is the candidate for Secretary of State. He's running as a Republican. He's been active, and although he is dwarfed when it comes to the financial aspect of this whole thing, you've been working the social media and the streets pretty hard, right?
That's correct, Dan. Every day for the last 4 months.
Yeah. Welcome. Nice to have you.
Thank you for having me on.
You've been mixing in and out of the political scene for a long time. You've attempted to run for mayor a couple of times, but couldn't get signatures back in the day. And what was that all about?
Quickly, 1998 and 2002. But 98, what's interesting about that whole scenario with Providence running for as a mayor's candidate, do you know last month, Ward 10 in Providence, Louis Aponte versus a fellow called Mr. Espinel. Espinel challenged Mr. Aponte's signatures.
Louis Aponte?
Yes.
Who still sits on the council?
Yes. So he had submitted one application with 30 signatures. They found that there was one questionable, so the board rejected that one signature. So Mr. Espinel, attorney, challenged that based on, guess what? Cianci versus Cortellessa from 1998. Truth be told, I was vindicated that in my case with Cianci, when they went in and objected to the signatures in my account, they rejected 2 full pages based on 1 or 2 signatures per page. So technically, that was illegal and unconstitutional. So I should have stayed on the ballot legally.
So that which they do today would not have been, if they looked at it today the way they used to.
Yes.
If they looked at it with the way, if they did then what they do now, you would have made it.
Yes, sir.
It only took me a minute to get that out. Holy cow. Yes. All right,
That's
so
true.
You're running for Secretary of State. Why? There's a little story behind it.
Well, the Secretary of State, why I got involved, I was asked basically by the Republican Party to look into the Secretary of State's office back, I think, around June 1st. I went back and did some review on it, and I found some interesting issues regarding the voter registration laws, the voter ID laws, and a few other issues under their domain. So here we are. I've been focusing on those major issues. A lot of complaints, a lot of issues regarding potential voter fraud. I want to streamline the voter registration law in Rhode Island, enforce the voter ID law in Rhode Island, and to make sure every Rhode Islander who's legally able to vote, and we protect their vote. I always say this, that it takes 2 good, valid votes to offset 1 bad vote. And it means a lot to you, myself, and to everyone out there that at least that we know when we go to the voting booth that our vote counts.
It takes what? 2 invalid to offset 1 valid?
It takes 2 good.
2 good.
To offset 1 bad.
Why is that?
Well, you have...
I'm trying to figure out the math on that.
Okay, so if you have 1 bad, 1 good, okay, it evens out, so the other one has to be able to be either against or for the other opponent. 2 versus 1. It's a small formula.
I think there's some algorithmic challenge to that, but we'll figure it out. But
okay.
You were telling me before the show that there was more of a story behind you running for Secretary of State, or is that it? They just kind of recruited you as a...
Basically, I went into... I was in with Bob Lancia, my rep, who lives 2 houses from my house in Cranston, and he was looking to maybe jump up into a higher position statewide. and he asked me if I wanted to get involved in the 16th rep board. And I went in, and basically the conversation focused after Brandon Bell and the committee talked with Bob on his potential jump. They asked me if I was interested in running for Secretary of State. And I think it had to do with the history in Providence on those 2 potential runs, and some work that I did on the Donald Trump campaign in 2016 as a committee member with Joe Trillo as the chairman.
Okay.
We did a lot of grassroots on that committee in 2016, actually.
All right. So are you running just to be a good player? Are you running to be a member of the team? Or are you running because you think Nellie Gorbea is not doing the right job?
Well, I think that her focus is not my focus. I guess her focus, some people would think, is okay. Very liberal interpretation. Register everybody that walks around Providence and all other 38 communities and cities, many bodies, just try to get everybody registered, questionable procedures maybe. So my position would be to streamline that, tighten that up, quality over quantity, basically, approach, and to provide the structure for that, especially down at the Secretary of State's office, that law regarding to register someone on a utility bill. There's too much fraud going on, Dan. I mean, there's cases here, authorities have arrested people who are actually making Social Security cards, documents. So technically, if this individual here that was arrested touched 100 people with phony Social Security cards and driver's licenses, they could be on the voting rolls.
You're referring to a specific story?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Right. All right, when we come back, we'll take a look at exactly how we tighten up the voter registration process. Stay with us.
Destroyed the party.
So there was your announcement. Hey, listen, if you got a sign and you got a podium, that's a real campaign. There's no doubt about that.
Yes.
Pat Cortellessa is the Republican candidate for Secretary of State running against the incumbent Nellie Gorbea. You've got a flyer here that talks about the things that you want to do. When you say you want to tighten up the voter ID law, specifically, what do you want to do?
Well, it's more at the lower level there, voter registration law. That's where you actually get people to get onto the voting rolls.
Okay.
Very loose, Dan. Documentation, the paperwork that's requested to get on the voting rolls in Rhode Island are questionable. And technically, anything...
Well, there's a lot of federal mandate in terms of accessibility.
Mm-hmm.
What's the gap between the federal mandate and what's happening here in the state that you think is loose?
Well, I know there was some issues with case law regarding a photo ID, a driver's license. That was somewhat, I think, in one case, the Supreme Court from another state rejected. But I think what's really loose is the utility bill to prove address to get on the rolls, a credit card, a debit card, a Social Security card, which, okay, in a perfect world, maybe some people would say that's okay. But in this time in life and what's going on in America, in the world, with fraud, with foreign powers trying to infiltrate our election system, paper documents can be questionable. I think we need to step up a little bit.
Do you have any level of expertise on this? I mean, you work security in your professional job, correct?
Yes.
Does it transfer?
Somewhat, not 100%, maybe 35% of the IT that goes with security. I also worked with Amica Insurance. I was involved with security there. A very highly intense security regarding their insurance rolls. So it's almost like a little bit, the same. They protected their insurance rolls, customers, like anything else in the world. So basically, could be the same concept with voting rolls. So, I would call in CMIT Solutions as a backup, experts on the IT issues and computer software, the motherboard issues. I know we had an issue with the motor vehicle law in Rhode Island, where we had 5,000 registered voters that were registered under their registrations, got lost in the shuffle. The IT couldn't find, and they didn't get the work back to the Board of Elections, and it could have caused a big problem. So I did call for an audit to see how deep that went.
Speaking of board elections, you think they're effective?
You know,
they don't report to you. But,
no, they don't.
I know, or they wouldn't report to you.
Yeah.
But what's your take on board elections?
Steve Erickson, I think he's doing a fairly good job. I mean, the only question down there is the absentee ballots and the emergency ballots, in which my opponent has pushed that. Very concerning, by the way. You could probably have up to 12,000.
Emergency is overstated these days because of the access. I mean, you know, a hangnail could be an emergency right now.
Well, remember now, in my opinion, it's a way they bypass the voter ID law. Because when you ask for an emergency ballot and you waive the requirements why you need one, because right now you don't need any reason, and that's my opponent's position, by the way, she enforced that. You have a problem there because technically it's only witnessed by two people. Who's the people? Who's the witnesses? So when you know, or a notary that now under the watered down notary laws, you don't have to show an ID to the notary. Yeah. So there's some issues there. And don't forget, Dan, this could hit up to 10,000 to 12,000 ballots submitted after the initial legal voting process.
You also say after somebody is passive for 6 years, you want them off the voter roll?
A couple months ago, the United States Supreme Court, Ohio versus their voter roll Secretary of State issue, they gave the rights to every state to clean up their voter rolls. So technically, you could actually, I think they're using 2 years. That's a little draconian. But here, and that was only an issue I put out, I probably could do 8. We would look at an 8-year window that if someone does not use their voting rights, and they can always
go back. You say 6 on your brochure.
I say 6. So if you want to leave it at 6, fine.
So, I don't want to do anything. I'm just asking you what your thought is.
Okay. So if it's 6, it's not carved in stone, but it's a point of to be taken. That would clean up the voting rolls. You got 785,000 registered voters in Rhode Island. We only have a population of 1 million people. So eventually, that's going to, you know, there's an imbalance there. I think with that, you probably knock off about 200,000 people that don't vote in Rhode Island. They could be passed away. They could be, you know, moved away. I mean, I know there are some procedures now that you can trace certain issues and certain people outside the state, but that would clean it up pretty nice. And I want to give the people of Rhode Island this rock-solid confidence that when having me there, I'll oversee all this in their interest, and they'll feel that that's been taken care of, and that we treat everybody fair and equitable, but we also trust but verify.
Well, I was going to ask you for a final thought, but I think that was it. Trust and verify, and take a look at Pat's. You had a website, right?
Yes, sir. Yep.
What is it?
PatCortellessa.com.
And you can take a look and see what else Pat has up its sleeve for this particular race. Good luck to you. Nice
Thank
to
you,
see
sir.
you.
All right.
Always a gentleman. Final word when we come back. Stay with us. So again, we hope to bring Nellie Gorbea in here in the next week or so for her discussion on why she should be reelected to Secretary of State. You know, there's some ballot questions that are on for this year as well. We tend to be pretty affirmative on those. URI and Rick are asking. We'll discuss that a little bit later on in the week. Tomorrow, we're going to have an interesting conversation on what's happening in the city of Warwick. So if you are in Warwick or you know people in Warwick, and who doesn't, right? Second or third largest city. I think it's tied, like 2 people away from Cranston, one way or the other. But it's a problem right now. They've got some side agreement issues for vacation benefits that are under investigation, and I'm guessing not just locally. That will be our focus on the Tuesday program. Talk to you on the radio at 3 until 6 on WPRO. Good night.